All right, YouTube, due to the prevalence of disinformation online, I thought I would clear the air here. I know that a lot of the sort of latter stage, sort of the Trump fans on the alt-right have gravitated towards this channel. So I'm going to tell you the truth that you're not going to hear in any echo chamber. You're also not going to hear it from the media, either right or left. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter whether it's Fox, CNN, MSNBC. It doesn't fucking matter. Foreign, domestic. You're not going to hear the truth from them. I think you all know at this point that the media just lies over and over about everything. Doesn't matter whether it's political, social, global warming. It doesn't fucking matter anymore. It doesn't matter what they're talking about. All they do is lie all day. That's why people are abandoning TV and they just tune into YouTube streams and bullshit like that. Like, I mean, I probably have more viewership than some of these retarded pundits at this point, so I'm just going to go with that. As far as Trump goes, of course, you've seen day after day, everyone talks about the polling. Clinton's ahead. Trump is collapsing. Oh, Trump will never recover from this. First and foremost, I told people some time ago, Trump would go into the general at a disadvantage in polling. Clinton would be ahead. It would have been strange if he had come out ahead after, grabbing the presumptive nominee slot. It would have been very odd because the Republican Party's still disunified. What you have to realize is that there are still Sanders fans. This is number one. There are still Sanders fans that say they'll back Hillary Clinton when they're asked in polling, who do you support, Trump or Clinton? And by the way, her polling is lower when Johnson happens to be there, which bears out exactly what I said. He's stealing more votes from the Democrats than the Republicans. That's a good truth that people need to learn. Jill Stein's only taking it from the left. She's not going to get any Trump fans to support her, so don't worry about her either, and she'll never crest over 5% anyway. I said there are many, many Sanders fans, only about half of which will actually vote for Hillary in the general, by the way. The rest will vote third party Trump or stay home. A lot of them say they'll back Hillary on polling now because they still hold out hope that Sanders will be the Democratic nominee. They're essentially being told, do you support the Republican or the Democrat? And you have to look at the polling methodology because often that's what they're actually being asked. They're not asked a specific candidate, they're asked for party. But when Hillary inevitably becomes the nominee and doesn't have Sanders as VP, which she won't, they won't back her. Her numbers will stagnate or drop a bit. Trump, on the other hand, you have to realize his numbers soared up during a period of time where he could force himself down the throat on the airwaves and internet and everything else, where he could have continual media dominance because he had multiple opponents. Now, if you have multiple opponents, you have a large number of people that can attack you or say something stupid that you can then chime in on. And if you do that right, you can dominate the news cycle. What does this do? Trump never cared about Christie, never really attacked him. About Carson, never really attacked him. Fiorina, never really attacked her, a couple times when she rose up, and that's about all. Who did he primarily focus on? Mainstream candidates. Centrists, people like Marco Rubio, people like Jeb Bush, people like Ted Cruz, the inside outsider. Why? They're the ones that need the media to cover what they're doing in order to increase their lead. The fringe candidates, the insurgents, he never worried about them. He knew that as long as he was the one dominating the airwaves by saying the most crazy shit, that they would be starved anyway. They can't rise up anyway. They can't be the nominee. They never had a chance to become the nominee. Ben Carson, Chris Christie, all these, they were never going to become the Republican nominee. The only real people he focused on were the mainstream candidates who require a lot of money, number one, and a lot of attention, number two. As long as the field was crowded, which it was right up against the line there around the time of pre-Indiana, remember, or certainly like New York and those primaries there where he was going to win anyway, and it was a foregone conclusion he was going to win. Up until then, he had so many people that could say so many dumb things that he could chime in on multiple times a day that he gobbled up the news cycle, starving, taking the oxygen away from the fire of people like Cruz and Rubio and Kasich who needed media attention. What's the difference now? In the general, he's only got one opponent. And if he chimes in on something Hillary says, anything that he does is also framed as Hillary's involved. She gets attention too. The media is innately going to favor her. They're going to spin, even like Fox. You think that there aren't people at Fox who like Hillary more than they like Trump? Of course they do. Of course there are. There are plenty of them. Maybe not the Sean Hannitys who early on jumped on board the Trump train. Not that having Sean Hannity's endorsement means much to a person like myself. I don't happen to like Sean Hannity. Or Bill O'Reilly, or most people at Fox. And Fox early on was attacked by Trump and most of his fans as being a bunch of fucking conservatives too, let's remember. But yes, the media is going to treat Clinton with kid gloves. The fact that she probably has had people killed, the fact that she's made tens of millions from Saudi Arabia, the fact that she's been directly implicated in scandal after scandal for decades, the fact that she laughed and cracked jokes about defending a child rapist and getting him off the hook, the fact that she's done all of these things, the fact that her husband is also scandal-ridden, doesn't matter to the media. It's juicy only when the Clintons are in office. When they're not in office, they take a hands-off approach to these things and don't give a fuck. If you remember, when Clinton was actually running for office, nobody really cared about the fact that Clinton got his dick sucked or any of these other things. Nobody cared. Nobody talked about it. Nobody held their toes to the fire. They'll only do that to Trump because media organizations have partnerships with donors. Now, which candidate has spurned all donations? I wonder who it was. It was Donald Trump. Clinton's rolling in dough. And there's point number 2. Until Trump can pacify parts of the RNC, until he can pacify certain segments of his own party and or before Cleveland, he will be at a disadvantage regardless, especially when it comes to money. Because traditionally right-wing donors are now backing Hillary Clinton. Now, Trump doesn't technically need those donations to use the strategies that he's always been using. That's a good thing. And I fully expect that when it comes to debating, he's going to absolutely pound Hillary Clinton into the ground. That's why I still predict Trump has an advantage overall in the general. I don't care what the polling says now. And I would also like to point out that if it weren't for a couple of outlier polls that shouldn't even be aggregated with the RCP, Clinton would not be 6 or 7 points ahead of Trump. She'd be 3 or 4 points ahead of Trump. That seems more appropriate to me. I believe that's the real number. But Trump's fans, and you need to understand this, need to dispel once and for all with the fiction that Trump is actually ahead and that the polls are skewed or rigged. No. Don't go down the Mitt Romney unskew the polls sort of bullshit because you're setting yourselves up for failure. Look at reality as it really is. Trump is behind Clinton right now. Sad but true, more people prefer Hillary to Trump. But in better news for those who back Trump or just don't like Hillary, things will probably change. Hillary Clinton's the least popular Democratic candidate in a very long time. She's the least charismatic Democratic candidate in a very long time. Al Gore was more professional than she is. She's the most scandal-plagued Democratic candidate of all time. She's had continuous difficulties even early on when she was seen more favorably with cracking 50%. She's not doing that well. The fact that Trump is doing a little bit worse is a testament to the fact that he burned all bridges with most of the RNC's donor base and has faced continual criticism from many members of his own party. That's why he's behind right now. The fact is, though, you have a rising Gary Johnson, and he is, and I don't feel badly about that, by the way, slowly chipping away at the Sanders vote. You have Jill Stein being amalgamated in the same polls, leading to Sanders fans acknowledging the existence of a Green Party, perhaps entertaining that option. You have the fact that probably several million people, at least 2 or 3 million people, will not vote for her that backed Sanders. Most of them will go third party. Some will go to Trump out of spite. Some of them will stay home. Some of them will vote for Mickey Mouse. Things are set up short term for Trump to be at the disadvantage. I fully admit that. Until after Cleveland, he'll continue to be behind unless something major happens. Clinton would have to literally stroke out on stage or say something totally off the wall and it gets leaked. And I mean totally off the wall because we know the media will give the Clintons a pass on just about anything. It'd have to be really severe. It'd have to be Hillary ranting about black people and talking about picking cotton or something like that in order for the media to actually chastise her even a little bit. Or Trump would have to make some really brilliant tweet or something that really shoots him up there or solidify the RNC early. But what Trump needs to do, He needs to spend a lot of time preparing for debates. That's number one. He needs to do a lot more rallying and social media stuff, number two. He needs to muzzle Ben Carson because he pissed off the Republican Party with his gun statements. That's number three. He should consider kicking Ben Carson out as a surrogate. He should consider publicly chastising him for his comments, or at least distancing himself from that rhetoric. That does not play well into unifying the RNC. He needs to target independents and stop worrying about targeting Sanders voters. The only Sanders voters that will vote for Trump are people who are so mad at the DNC for rigging things that they vote for him out of spite. He's not going to get anybody who's still an ideological voter to come over to his campaign. It's just not going to happen, and he needs to understand that. That's point number 4. Point number 5, he needs to say nothing about Johnson or Stein, including discounting them as irrelevant, because then that just causes people to research them, and some of them find out they are relevant. Again, you've got a fairly hardened support base for people like Johnson and Stein, the same as you have for Clinton and Trump, but you can see the totals are malleable, and you can see Clinton is more or less stagnant in the mid-40s. That's not good news for her. Now, keep this in mind. The one last thing I'll say, and I've said it twice before, Clinton is supposedly up against the worst Republican in history, the next Adolf Hitler, the most xenophobic, bigoted, racist, horrible individual who could possibly come to power, who would start a third world war, collapse the economy, and cause Satan to pop out of the ground on the same day. This is how Trump has been framed by his opponents. And yet she's only ahead of him by mediocre single digits before they've had a debate, before either of them has officially even been declared the nominee. The Democrats right now are riding high, primarily because Trump has taken a break from fully dominating the media. Clinton's getting more coverage, and more of it's favorable. Most coverage of Trump has always been negative, but that didn't matter as long as he was capitalizing upon disenfranchised Republicans. Now he has to go after independent voters. This is how a general campaign is waged. Now, do I believe he will do these things properly, perform well at the debates, go after the independents, that his strategy will be sound, and that he will inevitably raise above Clinton? Yes, I do, especially in the Rust Belt states. Maybe not so much in a place like Virginia or Florida or Colorado, but in the Rust Belt swing states, which now include Pennsylvania and Michigan, which is not good for Hillary Clinton. It's going to force her to go out of her way to campaign in states that Democrats haven't had to campaign much in the last few elections. I believe he will do very well. Also, if Donald Trump is dumb enough to choose Newt Gingrich as a running mate, as some people are suggesting is quite possible, all bets are off. The idea of having Newt Gingrich as VP even would be a turnoff for me. It might force me to reconsider backing Trump, simply because of who Newt Gingrich is. I understand he's not as frenetic as somebody like Ted Cruz. He's not a Bushite. I understand that. But I don't like Newt Gingrich. I don't think he's qualified for the presidency. I think even the Republican Party made that clear the last time around when he was running a distant third against Mitt Romney and Rick Santorum, of all people. I think his idea about making a moon base is really entertaining. I think he's a funny guy sometimes. I think he's a little bit less of the far-right fanatic that some people tried to cast him as back in the Clinton administration. I think he definitely is like the arch-Clinton nemesis, and that would be probably good for Trump's campaign. But I think it would be inappropriate to put him in as VP. I think there are better options. I think John Kasich is still the best option, even if that has been taken off the table. Even if Kasich's no longer on the short list, I still think that John Kasich would be the best VP option. He has the executive experience. He has the experience overall. He's got the high approval in his home state, which is also a swing state in the Rust Belt. That helps certainly with Trump. He is well-spoken, but he's also seen as somewhat withdrawn and reserved in comparison to Trump, who needs to keep the feeling of dominance over whoever he chooses as VP. I think Newt shows a couple of these qualities, but not as well as Kasich. Kasich's also younger. I think that's to his credit. I think that Trump needs to find somebody who is young enough so that if Trump were to drop dead 3 years into his term, the person wouldn't be geriatric when they're taking over as Newt Gingrich potentially would be. He'd be quite old as well. I think he's Trump's age. I think he's a little older than Trump, actually. I could be wrong there. That's what I think Trump needs to do. Now, I think it will be done. I still give him an advantage, a fairly large advantage. Maybe not a 99% chance at this point because it's starting to look like he's frittering away some of his time on useless endeavors, but still certainly a 90% chance. So I wouldn't be too worried for Trump's fans. You got to realize you spent months believing he's like, I didn't do this because I studied anthropology and political science, and I'm looking at this from a different perspective, a less biased perspective. A lot of people spent months declaring him God Emperor, saying he was unstoppable, and now all of a sudden their faith is shaken simply because of some bad polling for a month. Now, that's not the way that politics worked. If you believed that, then you would have looked back many years ago and you would have said, Ronald Reagan's done for. He'll never beat Jimmy Carter. Look how far behind he is. You've got to realize he's facing the same general slew of problems that Ronald Reagan faced. It's just yet another comparison with that campaign so long ago at the dawn of the golden age of the 1980s. That's about all.